It's been almost 2 months since the Trump administration detained Columbia graduate and green card holder Mahmoud Khalil, a moment that soon became just the first of many. Since his detention, we've seen over 1,000 other foreign students have their visas and legal statuses revoked, with the Trump administration claiming they're just trying to, quote, keep our community safe. Of course, safe couldn't be further from how students are feeling with Trump's crackdown, especially at Tufts University, where students watched doctoral student Rümeysa Öztürk get kidnapped by masked ICE agents outside her apartment in broad daylight as she was on her way to an iftar dinner for Ramadan. A truly horrifying video. The Trump administration revoked her visa without warning, all for simply co-writing an op-ed in her student newspaper calling for the university to divest from Israel. Rümeysa has since been detained for over a month now in a Louisiana ICE detention center, where her US representative Ayanna Pressley met with her late last month, reporting back about atrocious conditions.
Rümeysa is enduring indignities that no one should ever have to. Denied access to legal counsel, denied access to toilet tissue even, for 3 days. Experiencing sleep deprivation, malnutrition, frigid temperatures.
Here to discuss more is Massachusetts Congresswoman and squad member Ayanna Pressley herself. Congresswoman, thank you for joining Mehdi Unfiltered.
Good to be with you.
Great to have you here. Sad we're talking about this story. We played a clip a moment ago and heard you describe a bit of Rümeysa's conditions in the intro. But briefly, can you explain what it was like for you to see her, this 30-year-old student, young woman, in horrific conditions? How was she holding up?
Well, you know, given the harrowing ordeal that she endured in this kidnapping. I mean, again, just to sort of paint the scene, it's Ramadan. She's going to an iftar to break her fast, so she's hungry. She is then approached by masked, plainclothed men, and they are so aggressive in their engagement of her. And in fact, she had recently been doxxed, and so she thought that this had something to do with her having been doxxed. And so she says, I'm calling the police, to which they counter, we are the police. And they're very physically aggressive with her. And then they handcuff her and take her away, without any of her constitutional rights being honored, no due process. She's been charged of no crime. She's also an asthma sufferer. And because there was no due process, when she was kidnapped 1,000+ miles away from the Somerville community, which I represent, it's a part of my district, the Massachusetts 7th, as is Tufts University. Once in custody in rural Louisiana, in this Bazille detention facility, which has a long documented history of human rights violations and abuses. She suffered several very severe asthma attacks while there, received inadequate medical care. There has been no religious accommodation. In fact, not only on a dietary aspect, but when it comes to a space to pray, a Quran, her hijab was removed without her consent by one of the nurses. So given the harrowing ordeal that she has experienced now as a political prisoner, I would say, comparatively, her spirits are good. I was very moved by the fact that although she knew we were there to check on her, as a part of this congressional codel with Ranking Member Benny Thompson on Homeland Security, Louisiana Congressman Troy Carter, and then, of course, Senator Ed Markey, and then Congressman Jim McGovern, respectively, from the Massachusetts delegation, were a part of that as well. She knew we were there to check on her well-being and her welfare, and she was grateful. But instead of making any appeals on her behalf, she spent the lion's share of the time really advocating on behalf of the other women that are detained there with her. And I also had the opportunity to spend time with about 15 of those women. And most of them are completely unaware of why they are there. The majority of them have been unable to attain any sort of legal counsel. So inadequate medical care, improper nutrition, sleep deprivation. I mean, a very degrading environment.
For a woman who's committed no crimes that we are aware of. They've not charged her.
She's not been
crimes.
charged with any crimes.
This is a speech crime.
Her only
Orwell
so-called crime is co-authoring an op-ed centering the humanity of all people. And I should say, before I saw my constituent who's been kidnapped and a political prisoner in this Bazille facility in rural Louisiana, I also did visit at Gina, the Mahmoud Khalil. And Mahmoud, said he grew up in Syria under Assad, and he knows what authoritarianism feels like. And this is it. I mean, these are the actions of a dictator that seeks to silence any dissenting voices.
Liking this video? Then don't just watch. Hit like, share, and subscribe. And tap the bell so you never miss a video or live show. But if you want early access to exclusive content, then you have to head to zeteo.com and subscribe now. You'll be supporting fearless, independent journalism. He's not just silencing them, he's also abusing our judicial and immigration process in the process. You are from Massachusetts. She's from Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. She was in your district. Why is she in Louisiana?
Well, and again, they continue to, they're in the process of actively appealing now. They defied multiple judges' orders. She was never to be taken out of state lines anyway. But for her to be in rural Louisiana, the reason she's been taken there is because this is one of the most incarcerated states in the country, whether you're talking about prisons, jails, detention facilities. And I do want to make this point that if you care about mass incarceration, you should also care about mass deportation. These for-profit facilities are owned by corporations in the same way that they benefit with mass incarceration. These detention facilities financially are incentivized to unlawfully incarcerate people. And any person of conscience should find this incredibly disturbing because, again, it's a violation of constitutional rights and of due process. But again, what I was most taken by with Rümeysa is her, her resilience in the face of this. I do think resilience is overrated, and this is a resilience born out of tremendous hardship, but that in the midst of that, she was still advocating for others.
It is amazing to me when you think about the Trump presidency, how many own goals they score, because I think there are many people they could have targeted, or some people they could have targeted, who would have been less sympathetic. And they went for Mahmoud Khalil, a guy who all his friends, including his Jewish friends, say never did anything wrong, was a wonderful, decent human being. We've seen Mehdi Madavi, just released in Vermont, singing with people about freedom. We are hearing about Rümeysa. You're saying she was advocating for other women, not just herself, when you went to see her.
Well, not only that. I mean, she is a qualified researcher. She's a PhD student.
I mean, you shouldn't have to be
at Tufts University, and so she was using her skills, her expertise as a researcher. She came to that meeting with copious notes and stories about the other women detained. Exactly.
I mean, what's so fascinating and depressing is you shouldn't have to be a worthy victim to get the world's sympathy. Everyone should have due process, even the worst people. But these are clearly not the worst people, and in fact, just before Rümeysa was detained, the State Department issued an internal memo saying there was no evidence linking her to terrorism or even anti-Semitism, and that Secretary of State Marco Rubio had no grounds to arrest her. We now live in a country where Marco Rubio, one man, the Secretary of State, can just detain any foreigner he doesn't like the sound of.
Just unilaterally, unlawfully. And
with masked men in the streets. I mean, this is America. I thought the Republicans are all about, don't tread on me, stand your ground. I'm amazed. God forbid one of these encounters turns violent or a gun comes out. I mean, if masked men came up to me in the street and just grabbed me without any ID, I hope we would all resist.
It was chilling. And
that video was chilling.
Well, the fact that we have the video is a testament to concerned community members and a bystander, a person of conscience. And in fact, Rümeysa told the story that when she was put into that car, handcuffed, and she looked up and saw in the window that a neighbor that she didn't know was filming, and that they put their hand up on the window, and it gave her tremendous comfort, even in that harrowing moment, that someone cares about me, someone is paying attention to what's happening to me, and hopefully, I don't know how much of what they've been able to film, but that this means that someone will come for me. And one of the things that she shared when we visited with her in the Bazille detention facility in rural Louisiana is how grateful she was that we were there, because the women of this detention facility, and herself included, feared that God had forgotten about them, feared that the world had forgotten about them.
So on that note, I have been impressed by Democrats such as yourself, Ed Markey, Peter Welch went to Vermont to see Mehdi Madavi when he was in detention. Chris Van Hollen, of course, led the way going to El Salvador, and others like Maxwell Frost followed. I've been very critical of Democrats for not standing up strongly enough against Trump's fascism, both in the first term and now the second term. And then I see Hakeem Jeffries, your leader in the House, saying, okay, everyone stop going to El Salvador. I see Gavin Newsom saying, this is all a distraction, let's talk about the economy. Where do Democrats stand on this issue right now of standing up to deportations, illegal detentions, the targeting of foreign students?
Well, let me tell you where I stand. Where I stand is that Donald Trump is a dictator, and the only way to beat a dictator is with defiance. And we have to reject this dystopian, dark vision of Donald Trump's America, and we have to resist it at every turn. The rhetoric is hitting different. The policies, these executive actions are hitting different. And so we have to move differently. We have to match their energy. And the other thing is that with Mahmoud Khalil, with Rümeysa, with Mohsen, again, with a violation of people's constitutional rights and of due process and of free speech, this is laying the ground foundationally and will be a threat to everyone.
Yes.
This means that this could be you tomorrow for suffering a miscarriage, because in Trump's America, that's been criminalized. This means this could be you tomorrow for reading a banned book. Because in Trump's America,
and this isn't just about foreigners.
Exactly,
it's U.S. citizens next.
Exactly, they mean to attack our freedom to learn and our intellectual freedom. This means this could be you tomorrow for practicing diversity and inclusion with this dictator-in-chief. Simply because you have a dissenting opinion from his worldview, you could find yourself incarcerated. And we heard Trump on that hot mic say that he has, would love to explore eventually
sending Americans
deporting
to Gulag in El Salvador.
U.S. citizens. So this is a threat to everyone.
And they've already expelled, kidnapped, I refuse to use the word, deported for children, American citizen children, one of whom had cancer. Have already been sent to Honduras.
The cruelty can only be the point. I mean, these actions are void of common sense. They're void of compassion. The cruelty is the point.
And he is detaining innocent students for op-eds, expelling American children with cancer. Meanwhile, on his first day in office, we're talking about the 100 days, in his day one, he pardoned 1,200 January 6th insurrectionists, several hundred of them violent people who assaulted police officers. And just this past weekend, apparently, he was chatting with Enrico Tarrio, the leader of the Proud Boys, who he pardoned at Mar-a-Lago.
Mehdi, that's actually, okay, so two things. One, that's why I could not remain at the joint session of Congress or the State of the Union. I walked out shortly thereafter because here was someone returning to the scene of the crime, a space that had been violated and desecrated by these insurrectionists that he had pardoned. And he'd returned to the scene of the crime. There was no way that I could sit there and stomach this propaganda rally, just one lie after the next. And moreover, he has no respect for Congress as a co-equal branch of government. So why would I sit there and give this person audience? And again, I have been a member of Congress almost 7 years now. I've never walked out of a joint address of Congress or a State of the Union, not even under Trump's first occupancy. Again, this is a moment that requires disruptive actions by all of us. And I certainly, what a dictator wants is a citizenry that is ignorant and uninformed. What a dictator wants, what Donald Trump wants is a citizenry that is indifferent to the suffering of their neighbors and that is inactive.
If you want more disruptive behavior, does that mean you don't agree with Hakeem Jeffries, who says, let's stop going to El Salvador?
I believe that our approach is one that we need to acknowledge that our destinies and our freedoms are truly tied. And that is the case that we need to be making to the American people. It is not it is both and. Okay. It's all connected. And so that's how I intend to continue to agitate, to mobilize, to litigate, and to legislate.
And what do you say to people on the left who say, of course, what Trump's doing is outrageous, but it's not without precedent. He's building on what Democrats did in the Biden administration, that your party in some ways paved the way for these excesses and these abuses of power. It was Kathy Hochul, a Democratic governor of New York, who allowed police to go onto Columbia campus and fire off a shot, in fact, in the hall. It was, other Democratic governors in other places that endorsed very repressive tactics against student protesters, Democratic mayors, Democratic members of Congress who voted for, bills to try and criminalize dissent or criminalize criticism of Israel. What's your response to people? I'm sure people come to you at town halls and the street and say, well, your party helped pave the way for this. What do you say in response?
Oh, they certainly do. But again, we find ourselves in a moment of emboldened white supremacy, and I could say there's many ways in which we have been complicit in that. My experience and my assessment of this, and we have to have that honest and real talk if we are to truly build a coalition that is intersectional, multiracial, multi-generational. We have to have that kind of, this is a season for call a thing, and my experience is that Democrats have often operated with scared power. And scared power isn't power at all. The fact that we have had a trifecta and we still did not restore voting rights, we still did not pass George Floyd justice and policing, Democrats win when we deliver, when people feel when we're advancing policies that go as far and as deep as the hurt, when we're communicating, not in slide decks, when we're not denying people's lived experiences. Listen, there's a lot of things that we have to take stock of and ways in which we have failed. And ways in which we have contributed. I mean, when people talk to me about immigration, I said, well, I can't have a conversation with you about asylum seekers and TPS holders if you're not going to talk about the role that U.S. foreign policy has played, in people, in countries being destabilized and people having no choice but to flee. So we have to be honest about the ways in which we have contributed to the moment we find ourselves in. And then we have to, again, we have to both legislate, litigate, agitate, mobilize. And here's the other thing I think is really important, Mehdi. While we are blunting the harms of this administration, leveraging every tool available, and I do think articles of impeachment is on the table, most certainly, we have to still seek to advance an affirmative vision. I recently reintroduced reparations and people said, why would you do that? And I said, look, this is a moment of anti-Blackness on steroids. So what's the response to that? Pro-Blackness. We still have to affirm who we are. The most compelling argument that Democrats have to make cannot be that we ain't them. We have to advance, and we have to advance an affirmative vision.
But many of your colleagues in the House, in the Senate, are saying reparations, police reform, that's all woke stuff. We need to be moving towards the center. We need to get back swing voters, white working class folks in Michigan. That's what they're saying to you.
They don't say that to me.
Okay. That's what they're saying about you.
They know better than that to say that to me. But they're also not talking to their constituents. Because if you go into community, what people are looking is for us to be bolder and to go farther. They don't want us to, we should not be moderating our aspirations. Again, let's blunt these harms, do the active work of resistance, be disruptive, agitate, match their energy, flood the zone, while also affirming what we are for, like universal child care, like paid leave, like a permanent child tax credit, like student loan
I'm glad you mentioned ambition, because the Republicans don't lack ambition, right? They get the trifecta and they go for it. They're like, we're going to dismantle the entire government with Doge. In the first 100 days, Donald Trump has done damage that may never be fixed to the U.S. aid budget and beyond. You also now have the Trump and Republican Party doing what Reagan and Bush Sr. and Bush Jr. only dreamed of doing in terms of Medicaid and the assault on welfare. Do you think they're going to get away with it? You talked about blunting the harms. You don't control either of the chambers of Congress. How do Democrats stop Medicaid cuts?
Again, I don't know that people really understand the extent of the callousness here. I don't know that we've ever experienced a person that has such contempt for every person who calls this country home. Look, there's some 80 million Medicaid recipients in this country.
A lot of them Trump voters.
A lot of them Trump voters. And again, what is Medicaid? This is health care. This means that your Mima is going to be kicked out of the nursing home. This means that your neighbors, people in your own family, that you yourself will likely have an inability to pay for health care, to receive health care. People will get sicker and people will die. And the fact that they're pretending that this is all under the guise of efficiency is laughable. Our country is not made more efficient. Our government is not made more efficient by making people hungrier, poorer, sicker, or more vulnerable. When you look now, the lion's share of this budget reconciliation, for the Energy and Commerce Committee, they've given them the instructions to cut $880 billion. There's no way that you can do that and not cut Medicaid. It's impossible. Similarly, for the Agriculture Committee, they've given them the instructions to cut $230 billion. There's no way you can do that and not cut SNAP. Similarly, they're cutting, LIHEAP, low-income families' ability to make sure that they have heat. I mean, these are the basic necessities. And so we have to, again.
They're doing all that while Trump plans a military parade on his birthday for this summer. So they have money for that.
Yeah, I mean, just like he's, going after all the people not working. And I don't know how many days he's been golfing since he's been there. But it's laughable.
During his first term, there were a handful of Republicans, not many, a handful, who tried to stand up to him, especially when January 6th came along, of course. But the Liz Cheneys, the Adam Kinzingers, they're gone. This time around, we're not seeing any House Republicans willing to speak out at all, even though they'll whisper about him behind the scenes and give anonymous quotes. You recently said in an interview with The Intercept that Democrats just need 3 Republicans of conscience to pass legislation with you that could combat Trump, protect the Constitution, protect their constituents. There aren't 3. There aren't even 1.
Listen, you know what is so... What bothers me is that whenever Democrats are in the minority, people will ask me, are you open to bipartisanship?
Yes.
I mean, well, first of all, show me where is a party to do bipartisan work with. The Republicans in the House have been operating as a cult of cowards who have been complicit in wholesale harm. So this is bigger than Democrat, Republican. It's bigger than right and wrong. At this point, it's just about good and evil. And if you're going to be complicit in your silence. And this is what happened last week in one of our committee hearings, where I brought up the story of, this is what it's come to. Republicans will not do town halls, right? Democrats are going into Republican districts, 10 toes down, therefore to hear people's grief, their grievances, their ideas. We're being accountable to them. And they're just, complicit cowards running the other way with an unwillingness to be accountable, and
getting a pass from the media,
and getting
who kind of say, well, of course they're not going to be bipartisan.
Well,
they're graded on the curve
again, and then in our committee hearings, as we enter into this budget reconciliation process, you're supposed to, when you're in committee and in this process, each side is supposed to vigorously defend what they're fighting for, what they're fighting to advance, what they seek to cut. And they were just quiet. And so again, because people are not being heard by their Republican members of Congress, they're now reaching out to our offices. And so I had a mother, Mary. She's a 70-year-old hospice nurse. She has an autistic son who is nonverbal, who cannot be left alone. It would be injurious for him to do so. She has another son who helps to take care of him. And they're only getting by because of Social Security and Medicaid. And Mary, again, a 70-year-old hospice nurse, said, we've received a call from the office asking us to come in to talk about my son's benefits. That's never happened. She said, I am bracing myself for what could happen. This will be a death sentence for my son. So I amplified this story in this committee hearing in financial services to Rep. McClain. And she was very upset that I shared this story. And my pushback is you should be much more upset about the story that was shared and the fact that your constituent felt that they could not go to you for advocacy and for protection.
You mentioned committee hearings. I do want to ask a committee question as my last question to you. Also a question about the Democrats. You mentioned we need to be what we're about. We need to be ambitious. We need to have a positive vision, not just be anti-Trump or anti-deportations. Your party's poll ratings are pretty bad right now. They're like 27, 29, they're all-time lows in terms of approval ratings for the Democrats. Is one of the reasons that your party as a whole doesn't have that fighting spirit, doesn't take the fight seriously. And one classic example of that is when the House Oversight Committee went to pick a ranking member for the Democratic Party, they overlooked your squad colleague, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who threw her hat into the ring, and went for Jerry Connolly, who was recovering from cancer. He's now announced that his cancer's back. We wish him well, and I hope he gets back to good health. But he's decided to step down. appropriately so, many would say, he shouldn't have probably gone for it in the first place. And now Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez is saying, well, you know, I don't think the dynamics are there for me. I don't think it's still right. She's not going to throw her hat back in that ring. It's the Oversight Committee. Not every American's talking about the Oversight Committee. I get it. But is it just a kind of illustration of what your party has got so wrong on so many of these key issues when it comes to picking the right messengers, the right communicators, the right fighters?
Yes. And again, it's exactly why, why it's important to listen to the people who sent you to Washington, because I can't even believe that I'm saying this, because in the 7 years, what a sea change. The fact that that people would say, no, what we need are a greater diversity and younger people in these roles. That is very counter to the culture. But again, our caucus has a deep bench of talent.
Is anyone born after 1960 allowed to become a chair of a committee or a senior member of the Democratic Party?
We shall see. But again, in order for us to, one of the things that really sticks to me from this last election is that we lost the youth vote. And there are many reasons why, we could analyze and enumerate why that is the case. But I think one of the key reasons is that they don't see us as the party of the future. Young people are idealistic and aspirational. They are bold and unafraid. And they didn't vote Republican, but they stayed home. We need to be the party of the future. We need to be the aspirational party, unapologetically so, in order for us to build this intergenerational, multiracial coalition. And we need a coalition and we need a movement, because MAGA is not only a cult, it is a movement. And you only beat a movement with a movement. And I do not believe, Mehdi, that this is about weathering the next 4 years. I believe this will dictate the next 100.
On that note, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Did
you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to zeteo.com. Your support matters.